Good morning. Jeffrey Ward. Jeffrey with a G. Ward is W-A-R-D.
May I inquire, Your Honor?
Absolutely.
Good morning, sir.
Morning.
Could you please tell the jury where you work currently?
I am currently an Assistant United States Attorney for the District of New Hampshire.
And is an Assistant United States Attorney, otherwise known as a federal prosecutor.
Yes.
How long have you been working in that capacity?
Just over 10 months.
Prior to working as an Assistant United States Attorney, where did you work?
I worked at the Attorney General's office in New Hampshire.
How long did you work for the New Hampshire Attorney General's office?
10 years.
What was your role at the New Hampshire Attorney General's office?
I was, for the last 4 years, the Chief of the Criminal Justice Bureau. And I was, for the time prior to that, an Assistant Attorney General working mainly homicide cases.
Could you just briefly, in a general sense, describe for the jury what your duties as the Chief of the Criminal Bureau entailed?
Sure. There are about 54 attorneys or 54 personnel staff members in the Criminal Justice Bureau. It included the Homicide Unit, the Drug Prosecution Unit, the Public Integrity Unit, the Medicaid Fraud Control Unit. So a number of different areas of prosecution that I supervised, as well as the fact that I carried my own full caseload at the time.
You mentioned carrying your own full caseload. Does that mean that you were actively prosecuting cases in court as well, in addition to your administrative duties?
I was, yes.
During your 10 years with the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, did you prosecute homicides?
Several.
At any point, were you a lead prosecutor handling a homicide case?
Yes, for many years.
Can you say about how many homicides you prosecuted while with the Attorney General's office?
Objection, Your Honor.
If counsel approach.
His credentials here. Mr. Ward, in your capacity as a prosecutor with the New Hampshire Attorney General's office, did you ever visit crime scenes for cases you were handling?
In every case.
And what was the purpose of doing that?
So there's a number of reasons potentially to do that, but it was always our practice for the entire time I was at the Attorney General's office that once a scene was secure, that we would do some level of walkthrough. It's invaluable when you're trying the case to be able to have seen it, to be able to have been there, seen the layout, experienced the relationship between things, really been able to commit to memory what that scene looks like. It's an important part of understanding a case, understanding what happened or potentially happened in any given case, and having that in your mind.
Mr. Ward, when you visited crime scenes as a prosecutor, did you play any active role in the processing or collecting of evidence at those crime scenes?
Never, no. The point in going is to observe, again, as I discussed, but we're not involved in the crime scene evidence collection.
Mr. Ward, are you familiar with the investigation into the deaths of Stephen and Dishwendy Reed?
I am.
How are you familiar with that?
I was the lead prosecutor assigned to that case when the homicides occurred.
And just generally speaking, as part of your initial involvement in that case, what did you do?
So, you know, we get called sort of anytime, day or night, when these matters happen. We'll respond, depending on the scenario, to the scene or to the local police department. Here was responding to the local police department and working with investigators in the initial investigation in an attempt to determine what occurred.
As part of that initial phase of the case, did you visit the crime scene on the Marsh Loop Trail in Concord?
Eventually, not right away.
And did you continue to be the lead prosecutor for the months after the case came in, so to speak, in April of 2022?
I did, yes.
On May 20th of 2022, did you visit the Marsh Loop Trail crime scene?
I believe I did, yes.
Was that your first visit to the crime scene?
I don't think it was. I think I'd been there at least one time prior.
On May 20th, why did you go back to that crime scene?
So we always travel to any crime scene with investigators. We went back on that particular day. I say we, I mean prosecutors. We went back on that particular day with the assistant deputy medical examiner in order to view the crime scene with the medical examiner, with Dr. Weinberg, to see if that aided at all in his work and his conclusions.
Who was with you that day?
So it was myself and Senior Assistant Attorney General Danielle Sikowski, who was co-counsel on the case at the time. We were there with Detective Wade Brown and Detective Danica Gorham, and then Dr. Weinberg.
Did you visit in the morning or during the afternoon?
I believe it was basically first thing in the morning.
Mr. Ward, when you arrived at the area of the Marsh Loop Trail crime scene, could you please describe what you did?
Sure. So we walked the trail, I think from Portsmouth Street, we walked the trail back into the area that I understood from the investigation to be the crime scene, sort of on the trail. From there, we went right, I'll say, I think it's north, but went right. There's a large tree on sort of the right-hand side of the trail that, at least for me, sort of marked the area where the bodies were then found off the trail. So we went off the trail, sort of walked that area. Concord PD had it extensively marked, so we, sort of knew where we were going to show Dr. Weinberg around. So we went off trail, went to the area where the bodies were eventually found, walked down there, showed him around, and then returned to the main trail.
When you returned to the main trail, what happened?
So there, we were, again, sort of standing around talking, looking around. I walked a few feet, sort of further down the trail, so beyond that tall tree. I hadn't been, I don't think, past that tree, and so I wanted to walk down there and look down the trail and just sort of see it from that perspective, from a different perspective, because I realized I hadn't viewed it from that perspective before, and was just looking around in that area.
When you went to that area, a little bit past that tree, and you turned around to look down the back of the trail, what did you see, or what happened?
So in standing there and in looking around, at some point, I looked down to my left and saw, to me, what appeared to be a couple shell casings sort of in the leaves in pine needles.
Shell casings, a portion of a bullet that's ejected when a gun fires a bullet?
Correct, yes.
When you saw those two shell casings, can you tell, in relation to that tree, where did you see them?
So they were, again, where I was, so I'll not make it confusing, but beyond that tree, so further down the trail, again, down to my left and sort of near in the general area of the base of that tree.
When you saw those two shell casings, what did you do?
I stepped back and immediately, I think, alerted Detective Brown. I don't remember exactly what I said, but something to the effect of, Wade, come take a look at this.
At any point did you touch those shell casings?
No.
At any point did you touch the area around them or disturb any of those sticks or leaves near them?
No, not at all.
What did the detectives do once you informed them of what you had found?
So both Detective Brown and Detective Gorham came over, put gloves on, started looking at them. I think one stayed at the scene, one went back to a vehicle to get the proper things to collect the evidence with, the baggies and all of that stuff. And Dr. Weinberg, Attorney Sikowski, and I just sort of stood back while they did their work.
Did the detectives eventually collect those items?
Yes, that's my understanding. Yep.
After the detectives collected those items, did you see them again?
No.
I have no further questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Cross-examination?
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning.
Good morning, Attorney Smith.
Can you see this okay?
Sure.
And for jurors, I think I'm going to have to move it a bit for those in the corner there. So just to set the stage, you had actually been on Marsh Loop Trail prior to May 20th, right?
I believe so, yes. It was
And-
not my first time there.
Okay, and I think that your testimony was that you had, well, first of all, on this chart, assume, if you would please, that that circle with the 1 is tree number 1 is the big tree that you noticed, okay?
Okay.
So I think that you said that you had not been beyond that big tree when you went there before.
Correct. We had, again, entered from Portsmouth Street, and so because of the area where the bodies were found, we hadn't gone any further down the Marsh Loop Trail previously.
Okay, and about how many times had you been there?
Again, at least once. I can't recall if I'd gone out there with detectives more than once prior to that.
And I think I heard you say that once the crime scene is secured, so before the crime scene is secured, you won't go there.
Correct.
And were you there while the crime scene was secured?
Again, I think that's where I was there after the crime scene was secured. You know, part of the reason we didn't go, usually that happens within the first day or two, but obviously this is an outdoor crime scene. This was somebody where there wasn't anyone who had been arrested yet. So, and the searching there took, because of the nature of the scene, took several days. So we didn't go out there, for at least, it was over a week, I think, before we were first out there.
So I think that answers my question. The crime scene had already been released by the time you went there?
Correct. I mean, I think release is an interesting word with again, an outdoor crime scene, but they didn't have officers posted on it, sort of 24 hours at that point by the time we first went there.
And the public was allowed to walk along Marsh Loop Trail not while you were there at that moment, but in that time frame, the public was allowed to walk along Marsh Loop Trail?
When we first went there, so far as I'm aware, yes.
And the public was allowed to go into the woods off of Marsh Loop Trail?
After that initial, week or so, as far as I understand it, that's my understanding, yes.
Okay. And the public wasn't allowed to go there while you were being escorted with the medical examiner, right?
So that's a good question. I don't know I can't recall if anyone was stationed at Portsmouth Street or anywhere else on the trail to sort of prevent that.
Okay.
I just don't recall.
All right. So you go with your fellow attorney, 2 police officers, and the medical examiner, right?
Correct.
And you're coming up Marsh Loop Trail, and the officers are pointing out areas of interest to you, right?
Correct.
And they were pointing out things like where they searched, right?
They were pointing out, yes, areas where they had found things
Okay.
is what got pointed out.
So just what was located, not the whole area of the search, right?
I don't think we ever discussed sort of, necessarily all of it. I mean, at that time, any of the search parameters.
Okay. So then as you are going down to the recovery site, there's actually sort of a worn path there by the time you're there, right?
By that time, it's not super obvious, but if you know what you're looking for, yes.
Okay. And as you're going down that trail, one of the things that they point out is a piece of wood that a green fabric had been located on, right?
Correct, there was a log down that some clothing had snagged on.
Okay. And then they take you down and they show you the site for the recovery of the bodies.
Correct.
And you're looking around from there, right?
Mhm.
And then you go back to, sorry, you have to say yes or no.
Oh, sorry. Yes.
And then you go back to Marsh Loop Trail and you're talking there just south of that big tree, right?
Yep, correct.
And they're also pointing out along that big tree an area where they found blood and a bullet, right?
Yes, although I wouldn't describe it sort of where you were pointing, but I understood it to be sort of where that trail or that worn path intersects. And I'm happy to point out where it intersects the Marsh Loop Trail, but generally that it was that area where bullet fragments were found and coagulated blood was found.
So you believe that it was right at the intersection of Marsh Loop Trail and the drag trail?
Again, I wouldn't necessarily put a pin there and say it's definitely where it is, but basically where those two intersected.
Okay, so south of the big tree, tree number 1,
Mhm.
somewhere along the trail, around the drag trail path.
Yes, but on the Marsh Loop Trail.
Okay, and then you stood around and you sort of took in the, what did you call it? Just sort of to understand the scene, right?
Again, you're taking in the area and the layout of the area, and again, different vantage points, different viewpoints. You know, understanding here that, again, there was nobody charged. There were still, it's part of the reason we're out there with the medical examiner, obviously questions about what had occurred in that area and how it had occurred.
Okay, and so as you have that conversation, you decide to get more of the feel of the area to walk on the other side of tree number 1 to sort of take it in and see some sort of perspective from that, right?
Yeah, again, I realized that sort of were I somebody walking in the opposite direction, sort of north to south, I hadn't seen the trail really from that view beyond, you know, what I'll call, again, that crime scene where the fragments and the blood were found. And so that was a vantage point I wanted to look at it from, again, in an attempt as the investigation is ongoing, to look at and think about how this shooting might have occurred.
Right, right. The specific agenda is to pull everything in for you, right?
Correct.
It's not to conduct a search,
No.
right? It's not to see if you can find something that somebody missed.
You know, I don't know that I'd necessarily say that. I mean, again, it's my eyes on it and my observations. So, you know, it's not uncommon. It seems to say, I want you to take, you know, can you take some photographs of this area, or, you know, did your video capture this? I want to make sure, as a prosecutor, knowing I'm going to have to present a case, that I see everything, and maybe I pick up on something that somebody else didn't notice, but, you know, I want to take it all in for me. So it's not to search in the sort of, you know, law enforcement search sense, but it is searching for me to make sure that I understand, you know, everything I can about an area.
Sure, and before you got there, you had reviewed all the information that had already come in about the case, right?
I mean, you know, early on in those sorts of, in any case, I've certainly been in touch with the investigators and
Okay.
been briefed regularly by the investigators. Doesn't mean we've gotten paper about everything and things like that, but I've certainly been briefed regularly by the investigators.
Sure. And then as you decide to walk on the other side of tree number 1, are you remaining on Marsh Loop Trail?
Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm not like walking behind the tree. I'm walking further down the trail.
Okay, so you're not even necessarily going around to study what's at the tree base. You're just sort of walking along the trail to turn around and take a look at the tree.
Yeah, so I don't believe I walked, like I don't think I circumnavigated the tree, but I did obviously, maybe not obviously, but in walking beyond that tree, I was looking at a rather large tree and wondering if that was an area. So I'm, you know, could someone have been, you know, ambushed? Because certainly a person my size, a person bigger than me could conceal themselves behind that tree. So I may have stepped off the trail, but I certainly don't believe I made my way all the way around the tree. Just to again see, could I hide behind that tree? How obscured could I be?
Okay, so let's look at that microphone as the tree. I know. But just sort of, you're looking and sort of to both sides and checking things out. And are you right at the base of the tree when you notice those casings?
I mean, again, I don't know that I went around it as much as you just did there. I'm happy to sort of.
Oh, I'm sorry. I meant for this to be the path.
Oh, okay.
So if you're walking along the path and you're kind of looking around and looking around the tree, do you think you're past the base when you notice, or are you at the base?
I think I'm past the base of the tree when I notice.
Okay.
I believe it's, you know, but I believe I'm past the base of the tree when I notice them.
Okay, and so you're not necessarily looking at the base of the tree, but you're sort of checking things out, and you look at the base and you see two casings.
Yeah, again, I'm faced sort of down trail because that's the perspective I want to look at. And so, yeah, I'm looking all around, and I notice, what appears to me to be two shell casings.
So you take a look and you see these casings and you say, what's that?
Well, no, I don't say what's that. I say, Wade, come take a look at this. You know, what do we think this is?
Okay.
Or something to that effect.
Okay. Sorry.
That's okay.
And Wade is Detective Wade Brown.
Detective Brown, yes.
And with him is Detective Gorham.
Correct.
And so you all go there and you look at what you see, those casings. And maybe somebody bends down and looks closer, but nobody touches, right?
Again, I'm not bending down, I'm stepping back along with, I'll say, the other civilian personnel. And so I believe Detective Gorham is bending down, looking at them. And again, I don't know if they had to go back to the car for gloves, if they had gloves on them. But then they start to engage in, you know, their evidence collection process.
While you're there?
Again, I don't know if somebody had to go back to the car and get stuff, and by that point we had left. I don't believe I see them bagged or anything like that, but for gloves. So I can't remember if anybody had gloves with them and started, you know, looking at the area then, or if they had to go back to get gloves before, or one of them had to go back to get gloves before they started looking at it.
So you have no recollection of anyone touching the casing while you're there?
Again, I can't recall whether or not somebody had gloves, put them on right there, or whether or not someone had to go back to the car to get gloves, and then they started taking a look at them.
Okay. Don't mean to be rude, but I also don't want to take too much time looking for stuff.
Not at all.
So, is it possible that, well, first of all, when you called over to them, they came around the tree, looked down, and saw what you were looking at, right?
Sure.
Okay. And then, do you recall Detective Brown maybe escorting you and the medical examiner back to Portsmouth Street?
Yeah, we certainly walked back. Myself and Attorney Sikowski and Dr. Weinberg walked back it again before I believe anything got collected as evidence.
Okay. And Detective Gorham remained at the scene while Detective Brown walked the two of you back to Portsmouth Street,
Yeah,
right?
if that's how they split it up, I can't remember whether it was Detective Brown that stayed or Detective Gorham that stayed, but if that's what you're telling me, that sounds right.
Okay. Well, they didn't just leave it there.
No.
Right.
I
It
was
was
just saying,
secure.
I can't remember whether Wade walked us back or Danica walked us back.
Okay.
But one of them stayed with it,
Okay.
and one of them walked us back.
And the reason that that person stayed with the casings was to make sure they remained secured while the scene got processed to collect those casings, right?
Correct.
And so with that in mind, it's fair to say that nobody touched the casings until it was ready to be processed, right?
I would assume not. Again, I don't think I was there the entire time, but again, I would assume not.
How tall are you?
5'11".
Okay. And so at 5'11", at some point you passed the big tree and looked at the base and saw two casings, right?
Correct.
I'm going to show you a copy of what's been marked as Exhibit 1091 for ID. Do you know what this photograph depicts?
From looking at, I mean, I don't know. I'm sure this is an area out at the scene.
Okay, do you see any shell casings?
That could be one right there.
Okay. Not sure?
Well, again, that looks like metal to me
Uh-huh,
under that stick.
uh-huh. Not sure?
No, I from a photograph, no.
Okay. Because while the casing was pretty easy to see from your eyes, this photograph, it's kind of difficult to depict whether they're there or not, right?
Again, I think that may be one. It's certainly harder to see it in a photograph as opposed to in person.
Okay.
That's-
And that was exhibit for ID 1091. And you can't say for sure what this photograph is, 1091 for ID, right?
I mean, I've seen thousands of photographs in this case. Again, based on the wooded picture, I assume it's an area of the scene. It appeared at the top that there was a tree base. There's lots of trees out there. But sort of in the center, it appeared to be, again, partially obscured by a twig, what looked to me like some brass.
Okay. And actually, before, no, that'll do. So that was you looking at that photograph, and on that day, on the 20th, you turned around and they were readily apparent, right? The casings.
Yeah, again, I'm looking around, and I certainly wasn't searching for shell casings, but noticed the casings.
And the casings were on the north side of the tree at the base?
In the area of the base, yes.
Okay. And that base, actually at the base, there was sort of an incline down to like a rain catch of sorts. Do you recall that?
I mean, certainly I think it was the gradation of the trail. There was a little hump, I would agree, in the area of that tree. And again, when you say the base of the tree, I don't think they were right, up against the tree at the base of the tree. I think there was some distance between the base of the tree and where the shell casings were.
Maybe a foot or so?
I mean, or a couple feet. Yeah.
Okay. But you're pretty sure that that's documented by the police officers that were processing those casings, right?
Yeah, again, I mean, that's their role at that point.
Sort of unusual for you to be here testifying about scene evidence, isn't it?
I mean, I've certainly never testified in a homicide trial before.
Okay. Thank you.
Any further?
Just briefly, Your Honor.
Absolutely.
Mr. Ward, do you remember if those casings that you saw, either of them was either fully or partially covered by any sticks or leaves?
To one degree or another, they were both, obscured by again the sort of forest debris, pine needles, leaves, sticks. They weren't, sitting on top of a leaf or something like that. There was definitely partially obscured in all the stuff that was there.
Thank you. No more questions.
Yes.
Obscured suggests that they were hidden. You actually saw them pretty obviously when you turned and looked in that area, right?
Yeah, I saw them. You know, they weren't, again, they weren't sitting on top of everything. They were partially obscured by, and so not fully hidden, but partially hidden by some of the leaves and pine needles and sticks.
Okay. And whatever position that they were in, you would anticipate that processing the scene would preserve their exact location and what may have been around it, right?
So, you know, I can only say what I can say about scene processing. Certainly they document with photographs to the degree possible. Certainly they document location as sort of clearly as they can. They would have had to have moved, you know, they would have had to have moved leaves and sticks, and certainly I would hope, and I believe this to be the case, that prudent investigators would search further in that area to see if there were additional shell casings beyond those two, so
Sure.
that the area would be disturbed.
So you're talking about the full processing. The initial processing would be to take photographs as is, right?
Again, I leave it to them what they do. There certainly be some sort of overall photographs potentially, and then photographs to show, you know, the actual shell casings. And if they had to move something to photograph the shell casings, that wouldn't surprise me. I think they would do as much as they could initially without moving it.
Right. The initial thing would be, this is as is, and then a slow uncovering or if it needed uncovering or
Objection.
recovery.
We're beyond the scope of redirect here.
I don't think so. I'm going to overrule that objection.
I mean, I think generally the answer to your question is yes.
Okay. And they were readily apparent to you, right?
Yeah, my wife gives me a hard time for being a little too observant. I notice things. I see things. I notice when things have moved. I don't know who else they were readily apparent to, but in looking around and taking that area in, the metal, the pieces of metal that I could see stood out to me, and I was able to spot them.
Kind of shiny.
Not yes and no. I mean, they're not natural, right? That's why they stand out. I don't think that they were. You know, I've seen plenty of shell casings. I've been to plenty of scenes. They didn't look like new, fresh shell casings to me, but
Okay.
they didn't look like they'd been there for, you know, a decade either.
Okay. So not fresh out of the box casings, but not old.
Correct.
Thank you.
Nothing further.
Any objection to excusing Attorney Ward?
No.
Okay. You're free to go.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good to see you.
Good to see you too.